What if Bran Stark didn't lose his memory after falling? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. As Bran opens his eyes, a weak whisper escapes his voice, but it is enough for Catelyn to hear. Her eyes drift toward him, and she lets out a gasp. She shouts for Robb and Maester Luwin. The three immediately begin fussing over him, checking his temperature and seeing if he is healthy. Once they see he is well, save for his legs, Catelyn glances down at her maimed hands and takes a deep breath. Her relief gives way to fear and anxiety as she recalls what happened just a few hours ago. Someone had tried to kill him.
Bran, I am so glad you're all right. I know it is difficult to ask you about this right after you just woke up, but there is no time to waste. What happened in the tower?
I was pushed out.
The answer is quick and simple, but it is like a pot of wildfire being dropped into the room. Robb tightens the grip of his sword and curses. Catelyn's face pales, her fingers clenching, while Maester Luwin clutches his chain. It is everything they had feared confirmed in a single sentence. Biting back her bile, Catelyn nods.
By who?
The Kingslayer and the Queen. I saw them in the tower. They were wrestling, I thought at first, but then they began kissing, and Sir Jaime reached his hands down between.
His voice trails off as he explains all of what he saw. Though his descriptions are odd and a bit confusing, it is clear to the three of them what was truly happening. Sir Jaime and Queen Cersei were having sex, and Bran had witnessed it. The revelation leaves all three of them in shock, wondering how that could be. The simple thought of it was enough to sicken them, and left them struggling to wrap their heads around this madness. Unfortunately, it made too much sense, and everything clicks together. The cat's paw. He must have been sent to ensure that Bran doesn't live to tell the tale. But Catelyn thinks back further to her sister's letter, warning them about the Lannisters. Did Jon Arryn know about this? Was this why he was poisoned? There are too many possibilities and all of them are troubling, but one thing is clear. Her family is in danger, and Ned is now in a city with the Lannisters. Catelyn decides to depart, taking a force of men to bring the news of this development. This time, she sacrifices discretion for security. Sir Roderick goes with her along with nearly 100 Winterfell men. But along the way, they gather men from other houses, telling them the dangers the Lannisters pose and what happened to Bran. Soldiers from different houses all volunteer, offering their aid as free riders and other men-at-arms. So by the time they arrive at King's Landing, Catelyn is backed by nearly 300 men from several northern houses, including houses Serwyn, Manderly, and Karstark. The troop comes as a surprise, but Robert is happy to welcome them there, at least until Catelyn speaks out.
Robert, you've always been a friend of our house, so I know you had no involvement in what I am about to say. But a man attempted to murder my son as he lay in a coma. I bear the scars to prove this.
Robert's face darkens as the court goes silent. Some gasp and others shift uncontrollably. Cersei's face pales, and Jaime tries to look at the wall. The Queen clears her throat.
Your faith in your king is noted, Lady Stark. Rest assured we shall stop at nothing to determine the truth.
Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but I believe we already have. At first, we had believed it was simply an opportunistic killer, but that was until Bran woke up and revealed something. He was pushed from the tower by the Kingslayer, after he witnessed him fornicating with his own sister.
A surprised murmur ripples through the crowds. Some gasp, others laugh nervously, but Robert is not one of them. He whirls around and faces the Queen.
What folly have you committed, woman? Answer me!
The King's Guard and her men-at-arms tighten the grip of their swords, while Catelyn's Northmen do the same. Ned grips his sword tightly as his men move to Catelyn's side. Before it can erupt in violence, though, Catelyn produces the Dragonbone dagger.
This was the weapon used in the attack. We must figure out who owned it.
An investigation is unnecessary. That weapon is mine. I had misplaced that dagger, although it seems clear where it ended up. Guards, arrest the Queen and drag her outside. I will take her in myself with that dagger.
Suddenly, Jaime is behind him, gripping his sword, blocking his path with a sneer. However, Ned steps forward as well. He glares at Jaime, but spreads his arms out.
That execution would be too hasty, Your Grace. As your hand, I advise you take caution. Perhaps we should have a trial first.
Robert glances at Ned in surprise, but when the father of Bran is advocating this, he cannot possibly refuse him, and sighs. Grunting, he gestures for the guards to take Jaime and Cersei away. Both are interviewed separately in preparation, and news begins to spread about this case. The realm is shocked at the development. The talk is about this madness all across the Seven Kingdoms, from the lowest pot shops to the great houses. How could the Queen be so mad as to commit incest with her brother? And a member of the Kingsguard, no less. The depths of this depravity are too much for countless people, and there is endless talking about it. Some wonder whether she is mad, others believe she is simply a whore. The one place where these rumors are not spoken about is in Castle Rock, where Tywin orders not a word of this be mentioned on pain of death. It doesn't just affect Cersei and Jaime, but House Lannister as a whole. Even his most steadfast bannermen mutter uncertainty about this. Some are even so bold as to ask Tywin about it directly, which is met only with a stern warning. Still, the fact that they are even talking about it is troubling enough. He doesn't just let them talk, though, and gathers his most trusted allies to ride towards the city. By the time he arrives, the place is flush with rumors, as their interviews only add to the confusion. Cersei denies it profusely, saying that the boy must have been delirious when he woke up, and that the murder attempt was just some common thief who raided their baggage train when he had a chance. On the other hand, Jaime admits the affair, saying he has no regrets and would gladly have a trial by combat to prove his innocence. When Tywin arrives, he immediately petitions Robert to halt this trial, reminding him that if this becomes public, it will affect his rule as well, since it throws the legitimacy of his children into question. It doesn't help how closely they resemble their children. Meanwhile, incest itself is not a crime punishable by death in the Seven Kingdoms, and they have no proof that his children are behind the murder attempt. When at last the great lords and ladies convene to present evidence, Catelyn brings forth a testimony written by Bran, talking about how he was climbing the tower when he saw Cersei and Jaime. Some of Robert's household also admit seeing Jaime leading the Queen off after they had arrived in Winterfell. They were also not spotted for several hours. The cat's paw's body is brought forward, and a few men recognize him as a free rider who attached himself to the royal entourage, along with the other men-at-arms and squires. But the most damning testimony comes from the most surprising source. Stannis arrives from Dragonstone, answering the call for the trial, but also for the evidence. He and Jon Arryn were conducting their own investigation, meeting Robert's other children and tracing back the Baratheon lineage. So far, all evidence shows that all Baratheon children have black hair, adding further doubt to the legitimacy of Joffrey and his other children. However, Tywin continues to staunchly defend his children, pointing out how none of this evidence is truly conclusive, and all circumstantial. There is no proof that either of his children provided the cat's paw with the dagger. The only real evidence is a witness who just so happened to wake up from a coma. Despite his efforts, he does not convince the lords, and many are happy to declare Cersei and Jaime guilty. This is effectively a death sentence, unless they confess or beg for forgiveness. Jaime will be sent to the wall, and Cersei will be sent to the Silent Sisters. But rather than debase themselves, the two remain defiant and instead demand a trial by combat. Reluctantly, Robert agrees, and Ser Barristan is given the task. As a member of the Kingsguard, he must represent the king. Jaime Lannister stands in the arena, clad in gleaming gold plate, the lion of House Lannister roaring from his breastplate. Across him, Ser Barristan Selmy, Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, adjusts his grip on his longsword. His white cloak billows slightly in the evening breeze.
Sir Jaime Lannister, you stand accused of incest and attempted murder. You have chosen trial by combat for yourself and on behalf of your sister. Ser Barristan Selmy fights in the name of King Robert. Let the gods judge the worthy.
The moment the signal is given, Jaime lunges, sword flashing, probing at Barristan's shoulder. The old knight pivots smoothly and parries. Jaime presses forward, feinting left before twisting his blade in a downward arc. Again, Barristan deflects and advances closer. Barristan only watches. Waits as Jaime moves again, trying to launch a few quicker strikes at his chest. The old knight sidesteps with the grace of a man half his age, catching Jaime's blade and twisting it aside. In a blink, he counters, an upward slash that forces Jaime to leap back. Barristan shifts his stance, pressing forward now, driving Jaime back with a flurry of strikes. Each blow comes forcing Jaime to parry and retreat. his confidence eroding with every step. Jaime grits his teeth and throws himself into the fight, launching a savage strike at Barristan's helm. The Lord Commander blocks, their blades locking for a moment. Strength against strength. This time, Jaime gets the advantage. Though the momentum is weak, it knocks Sir Barristan aside. Jaime tries to take advantage and lunges at him, raising his sword over his head. However, Sir Barristan dodges it, though it glances at his shoulder. He winces, and Jaime comes at him again, but the old knight slams his pommel into Jaime's ribs. The younger knight stumbles, gasping. Barristan presses the advantage, his sword a relentless blur, and scores a blow between his joints that leaves blood leaking. There is a moment of imbalance, and Sir Barristan seizes the opportunity. With a swift, calculated stroke, he knocks Jaime's sword from his hand. Before Jaime can react, Barristan steps in and drives a gauntleted fist into his jaw, sending the Kingslayer sprawling to the ground. The courtyard erupts in gasps and murmurs. Jaime, dazed, reaches for his sword, but Barristan places his blade against his throat.
It's over.
He lifts his helm up and drives the sword into Jaime's neck. The crowd falls silent, and Tywin curses, taking a step away and storming off. He does not stay to watch the execution of his daughter the next day. All 3 children are disinherited and sent to different houses to foster, though mostly so Robert can get them out of his sight. While this brings the matter to a close, it raises the questions of succession. Robert now has no true heir. Though Stannis is next in line, Renly convinces Robert to take a second wife, saying Margaery Tyrell resembles Lyanna and is far less shrewish than Cersei. The king reluctantly accepts this proposal, though he faces little joy in it. The thoughts of marriage are far from his mind. Instead, he is left in a state of depression as he considers everything that just happened to him. In a matter of weeks, he found out his wife is a monster who tried to murder a child, and his children are bastards born of incest. And yet, Renly insists, as now more than ever, he must secure his position on the Iron Throne, and the Tyrells are open to working with him. Robert reluctantly agrees. The only silver lining is, with the Lannisters removed from power, Ned is more comfortable staying in King's Landing and aiding Robert as the Hand of the King. However, this incident strains their relationship, as there remains a lingering tension between them. Though Robert had nothing to do with the murder and had apologized profusely, Ned cannot help but think Robert's own inaction played a role in the Lannisters' rise. He sternly reminds his friend that he had warned Robert many times to beware the Lannisters and to rule the realm well. Yet his actions brought chaos. The words are sharp and painful, but they kick Robert to begin working on restoring his position on the Iron Throne. The biggest of these is rewarding Stannis for his role in exposing Cersei. Robert personally thanks him for his effort, and Ned ensures he is given lands, some of the incomes owned by Tywin, and named Warden of the East instead of the Lannisters. Next, they begin to limit Tywin's influence by isolating him politically. This is much easier than expected, as few houses wish to join him after this disaster. Though his bannermen still fear him, this is a reminder that Tywin is still mortal. He miscalculated with his children, and now finds himself without a true legacy, as his only child left is Tyrion. But perhaps the biggest beneficiary to this contract was Littlefinger. With the trial, the case of Jon Arryn's death practically disappears, as no one truly questions the idea that Cersei was responsible. This leaves Littlefinger to escape notice while he begins solidifying his position in the Vale by marrying Lysa Arryn. Although many disgruntled Valemen complain about his relatively low birth, no one can truly challenge him, as this was a marriage consented to by Lady Lysa. This allows him to rule the Vale practically unchallenged. Even the Crown is not too interested in this, as while many find Littlefinger's ambitions distasteful, he has given them no cause to suspect his loyalty, especially after he rejects an offer of an alliance with Tywin. Instead, the young lord bides his time until the best opportunity presents itself. However, with all of this happening, Bran begins his slow recovery. Though he may never walk again, he begins to receive strange visions in his dreams, things he cannot understand. He goes to places he's never been before. He sees things that have never happened, and receives calls to go beyond the wall, to become the Three-Eyed Raven. At first, he tries to dismiss this as simple delirium, or an overactive imagination, but as the dreams persist, he becomes less certain, as it seems more like a pattern. When he tells Catelyn about this, she grows concerned. Maester Luwin believes they are simply dreams, but all around them, the Seven Kingdoms grow stranger and stranger. First, there are their direwolves south of the wall, but the Night's Watch have reported strange things beyond the wall. They report missing bodies, wildlings moving south in great numbers. Not just men, but the women and children too. And in the east, there are claims that dragons are being hatched. Catelyn cannot simply dismiss them and begins to consult with scholars and maesters to ask about it. Reluctantly, Maester Luwin writes to the Citadel, asking for any information regarding the three-eyed raven. But the answer comes from the most unlikely place. The crannogmen of the Neck come explaining their legends, how the three-eyed raven is a leader of sorts, one with prophetic dreams, the last of the green seers who once ruled the children of the forest. If Bran is receiving dreams like this, then perhaps he is being summoned by them. Bran sits before the great hearth in Winterfell's hall, listening to everything he's heard from the Reed siblings. Across from him, his mother stands, arms crossed.
I have to go. The dreams aren't just dreams, Mother. If what they say are true, then I must see what lies beyond.
Bran, you are my son. I will not send you beyond the wall on the word of old legends and dreams.
It is more than that. Bran is a green seer, Lady Stark. The Raven calls him because he has a greater purpose. Those who try to challenge their fate are the most damned.
And how can you be certain of this fate? That this is not some great mistake?
I do not know, but there is only one way to find out.
We will protect him. We swore to do so.
You're still a child, Bran. And the land beyond the wall is vast, dangerous. Wildlings, cold, worse things. Even the Night's Watch struggle to hold their ground.
I'm no crow, Lady Stark. I know that land better than the back of my hand. Let me guide us. Your crows can help.
The Night's Watch will guide us. There are men who will go with us. Northmen who believe in the old ways. Some seek adventure. Others feel the same call I do.
Catelyn exhales sharply, rubbing her temples. Silence follows, long and tense. The wind howls beyond the walls, carrying the first whispers of winter.
If you do this, there may be no return.
I know.
Do you? This is not some frolic through the woods outside Wintertown, Bran. This is an expedition to the wild lands of Westeros, the very border of civilization. If you go, men's lives will depend on you. You should be responsible for them. Can you sit here now and accept that?
I can.
Their party begins to assemble in Castle Black. Northmen, some eager, some grim-faced, all drawn by duty or belief, stand alongside Jojen and Mira. Among them are men of the Night's Watch, black-cloaked and solemn, ready to lead them beyond the wall. Bran turns in his saddle, looking to his mother standing in a tower, her hands clasped tightly. She has given her reluctant blessing, but her eyes hold the pain of a mother sending her child into the unknown. With a final nod, Bran urges his horse forward. The north is calling, and he will answer. The expedition moves with surprising ease, their journey northward marked by cold winds and endless snowdrifts, but little resistance. Northmen and Night's Watch veterans navigate the terrain well, their experience keeping them from wandering into danger, and their size saves them from ambushes. When wildlings attack, they are easily repelled, disorganized raiders, no match for seasoned warriors. Even when they move in force, they cannot face off against hundreds of well-trained, well-armed Northmen. Yet, as they press forward, a feeling of unease settles over them. None of them can shake off the feeling that they are being watched. No matter where they go or what time of day it is, they always feel like there are eyes upon them. At first, they assume it's wildling scouts, but as the days pass, a more sinister presence begins to weigh upon them. Jon Snow keeps close to Bran, taking time to teach him the ways of leadership. He shows Bran how to read the group's morale, how to spot those who are faltering, how to keep them moving. The situation is the perfect example of this.
Fear can break men as much as any blade, and fear is creeping into their bones.
Jon goes around the camp, reassuring men, praising them for their bravery or jesting with them to try and raise morale. It works, and Bran tries to join in. The whispers continue. Shadows move just beyond their firelight, the howling winds carrying strange sounds. Some men claim they see figures in the trees, silent, unmoving. Their horses grow uneasy, snorting and shifting, sensing danger before the men do. The truth becomes undeniable. They are being followed, not by wildlings, but by something far worse. Then, they find it. The cave, just as Bran had seen in his dreams. It looms before them, an opening in the frozen earth, ancient and foreboding. Relief washes over the group, but it is short-lived. The ground trembles. A deep, guttural groan fills the air. Then, they come. Hundreds of wights erupt from the snow, crawling from beneath the ice, from the darkness of the forest. Their eyes burn an unnatural blue. The Night's Watch men take position, shields raised, swords ready. Arrows fly, piercing the wights, but they keep coming, undeterred. Axes cleave through brittle bones, but more rise to take their place.
Bran, go!
He and Mira stand side by side, fighting off a group of wights, but Bran is frozen, terror gripping him as the dead swarm toward them. One nearly gets him, but Summer rips at its arm and tosses it aside. But that is just one among a small army that begins to swarm them. Men cry out as they fall, and their numbers soon begin to deplete. A deafening screech splits the air. Suddenly the wights falter, a wave of fire erupting from the trees. Figures move with impossible speed, striking down the dead with weapons of flame and obsidian. The children of the forest emerge, their eyes glowing like embers in the night. They hurl firebombs that burst against the wights, setting them ablaze.
Inside!
Mira and Jojen grab his arms, dragging him toward the cave's entrance. Jon and the others hold their ground, retreating only when the children push the wights back. Bran stumbles into the darkness of the cave, his heart pounding. A figure waits for him within, ancient, watching with eyes that seem to pierce through time itself.
Come. Your training begins now.
Back in the Seven Kingdoms, a new threat emerges as Daenerys Targaryen makes her move. Daenerys Targaryen's landing is swift and calculated, her forces securing a foothold in Westeros with little opposition. This is because while the rest of the Seven Kingdoms live quietly, Peter Baelish extends his hand. Ever the opportunist, he proposes a union that will solidify Daenerys' claim and grant her the Vale's resources. Marriage to Robert Arryn. The deal is struck in secret, with Daenerys promising Littlefinger a high place in her court once she claims the Iron Throne. With the Vale behind her, she prepares for war. Her forces move strategically, launching an invasion through the Riverlands, which remains scattered and is easily battered aside. But as the various lords rush to their seats and organize their defenses, they are surprised to see Daenerys ignoring them. They cut a swath of destruction, cutting down all who stand in their way, but leaving multiple castles untouched. They only strike out at those who get in their way, with Daenerys' dragons making sure no one sneaks up on them. Instead, their real target is the Westerlands. The Lannisters, isolated and lacking allies, struggle against the combined might of the Vale Targaryen forces and the dragons. Castles fall, supply lines are cut, and the Westerlands burn. Tywin tries to organize an army, leading his troops in isolated bands that ambush them and cut off their supply lines, but they are unable to risk open battle with the dragons, leaving their fields and mines ripe for the taking. But this aggression does not go unanswered. Robert Baratheon, now with a legitimate heir, Orys Baratheon, refuses to let his dynasty fall. He marches to war, gathering his loyal bannermen. Knowing the cost of a prolonged conflict, Tywin Lannister's last remaining son, Tyrion Lannister, is offered Castle Rock in exchange for his support, and with Tyrion in tow, Ned and Robert strike through the Reach. The battle erupts along the banks of the Mander, where Robert's forces clash with the combined armies of the Vale and captured Westermen. The river runs red with blood as Baratheon knights smash into enemy lines, braving a crossing. Although such maneuvers are risky and lead to heavy losses, Robert's ferocity urges them onward. Though not as strong as before, he still remains a formidable presence, shouting orders and waving his hammer around while Ned leads the charge. Lances are lowered and their charge breaks shields and bodies alike. Archers rain death from the hills, leaving men looking like pincushions, but Robert's threats and encouragement wheels them forward. The sudden reversal drives the invaders back and prevents them from advancing further, while rebels from the Riverlands begin to rise and ambush their supply lines. The war becomes a brutal stalemate. Robert, a seasoned warrior, employs clever tactics, halting the Targaryen advance. He avoids direct battles against Daenerys' dragons, instead using mobility, fortified positions, and attrition to slow her forces. He lures enemy forces into narrow valleys, where his archers shatter their ranks. He sends out raiding parties under experienced commanders like Stannis and Lord Eastermont, cutting off enemy supply lines and starving them out. But the Knights of the Vale prove their worth. When they do clash, the Vale Knights acquit themselves well, crushing several Baratheon camps and killing many young knights who think they can outfight them. Things only worsen once House Martell joins the fight under Daenerys, opening a new front in the war. Rather than be pincered, Robert withdraws south to the Marches, where they can regroup behind strong fortifications. But as they approach, the dragons loom overhead. The Marcher men are famed for their bowmen, and arrows rain at them, though the dragons' swift movements allow them to avoid it with only a few minor injuries. Even the larger scorpions are not enough for them. They simply dodge these attacks and circle as the defenders are reloading, resulting in massive casualties. Blackhaven, Nightsong, and Star's Pike all fall to these attacks. Soon the remnants of the army retreat to Harvest Hall, where Sir Barristan Selmy helps organize the defenses with Robert and his remaining men. The remaining troops are low on morale, simply praying to the gods and waiting for Daenerys to come as scouts report that the Dornish and Unsullied are just a few days away. Robert sees this and gathers his forces. He knows that their chances for success are slim, but rather than shake at those odds, he simply does what he always does in these circumstances: act boldly. As the army arrives, a desperate sortie is launched, with Robert at its head. The stag banners fly above his head, rallying the men around him who let out a defiant cry. The Dornishmen are taken off guard by this sudden movement, and most are unable to react until the dragons swoop down. Fire burns through the lines, scattering men who desperately try to avoid the fire or bathe out the flames spreading across their bodies. It is a difficult battle, but then from the right flank, they glimpse Robert in his antler helm, smashing through foes left and right. He had ridden out quietly, using his banners as a distraction and battering the Dornishmen. This forces Drogon to circle and prepare to attack again. That delay is all the men in Harvest Hall need. Arrows and scorpion bolts come raining down on Daenerys as she approaches. Drogon roars as arrows strike his flank and wings. While none of these are life-threatening, they are the worst injuries he's suffered so far in the war. He roars as 1,000 pinpricks hit him and leave Daenerys tumbling off. Robert whirls his horse around and gallops towards her with his Kingsguard close by his side as Drogon tries to attack again. However, the bowmen under the command of Sir Barristan ensure their king's safety by keeping Drogon at bay. The capture of Daenerys breaks the morale of the Dornishmen, and though the Unsullied fight fanatically to keep their queen safe, they quickly retreat back to the castle. Bran's expedition continues its desperate struggle against the Whites. Losses mount as the dead prove relentless, their numbers seemingly endless. Bran continues his training, trying to understand the secrets of the Three-Eyed Raven as his men buy him time. Swords shatter against frozen bones, torches flicker against the encroaching darkness, and men are dragged screaming into the abyss by clawing undead hands. Despite this, the expedition presses on, fighting tooth and nail to survive. They finally manage to send word to Robb Stark, warning of the true threat approaching from the north. They also know that Bran is right, and this means there is hope. Robb, realizing the urgency, calls for reinforcements, pleading with the warring factions to set aside their differences. Ned fully agrees and brings this message to Robert, telling him that their war with Daenerys can wait.
You want me to ally with the daughter of the Mad King, the one who claims my throne? I want you to save your throne. Orys will inherit nothing but a frozen grave if we do not act now. We put this war on hold. Let the Targaryens fight by our side. And when the dead are gone, we settle this amongst the living.
Silence hangs between them, heavy with history and resentment. Robert drains his wine and slams the goblet down.
Damn you, Stark. Fine. But if she turns against us, I'll kill her myself.
In the dungeons, the pair approach her and present their terms. At first, Daenerys can hardly believe this, deciding that this is some trick, but she is surprised when Tyrion shakes his head.
I know the men of the Night's Watch, Jorah Mormont and Jon Snow. They would not go along with this falsehood. You can't rule a kingdom of the dead. Fight alongside them now. When the time comes, they may even choose you.
We will fight the true enemy first, and then we will see who truly deserves the Iron Throne.
Robert rolls his eyes, but takes her hand, and both send orders for their armies to march to war. The wind howls as Bran Stark awakens from his final vision, his mind now flooded with the ancient knowledge of the Three-Eyed Raven. He blinks, the weight of centuries pressing down on him. What that means their time there is over. Bran hurries out where the remnants of the expedition have huddled over a tall hill, which they had turned into a makeshift fortress. But when the orders reach them, they hurriedly abandon their post and rush back to the wall. Scores of brave men already perished in their desperate bid to uncover the truth, and many more follow. Shambling whites pursue them relentlessly, their lifeless eyes glinting with unnatural hunger. Swords flash, arrows fly, and torches flare as the expedition fights through wave after wave of undead. Hundreds more fall after them. Great knights, lowly small folk, and desperate rangers litter the dead. Each one a reminder of what Catelyn told Bran. These people are depending on him, and put their faith in his words. That means their lives are his responsibility, and their deaths his burden. As he hears their screams and watches his men fall, Bran takes a deep breath. His heart leaps into the great direwolf, his spirit merging with his oldest companion. With a snarl, Summer barrels into the whites, fangs tearing through frozen flesh, claws raking through brittle bones. Around him, other direwolves, those who have lived in fear of the dead, rise as one, the vengeful storm of teeth and fury. They do not stop to count the losses. They run faster and harder than ever, until the wall appears in the distance. At the wall, chaos reigns. The Night's Watch fights with all they have, but the whites are endless. The men atop the battlements rain fire and arrows upon them. Hundreds fall, but it buys them precious time until the reinforcements from the kingdom arrives. Though the charms in the wall have been weakened over the years, and much recently with the death of the three-eyed raven, they are still there, and it should keep the dead out. And yet that is the problem. The dead may simply retreat back and rebuild their strength when the realm is less united. Bran looks to the past and into the future, reading threads of fate, and knows that this is their best chance to defeat the Night King once and for all. Bran stares up at the great ice barrier and realizes what must be done. The dragons must come. The others argue. Jon, Robb, even Robert Baratheon himself. But in the end, they all know the truth. With the weight of history behind him, Bran reaches into the wall itself, feeling the old magic that binds it together. He breaks it. The air shudders as the spell shatters like glass. At that moment, a great roar splits the sky. Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion descend like avenging gods. The battle explodes into chaos. The White Walkers stride through the snow, their swords of ice cutting down men as if they were wheat before the scythe. Even as the fire rages around them, they continue to advance. The Whites claw their way over the defenses, scrambling to scale the wall or tearing at the gates. Robert Baratheon roars, swinging his warhammer, stopping them from reaching the gate. He is a storm of destruction, but even storms can break. As he rushes at a White Walker, his hammer breaks and shards pierce through the chinks of his plate, leaving him bloodied on the ground. Bran sees it all, and something inside him snaps. A deep, primal force awakens within him. He is no longer just Bran Stark. He is something older, wilder, bound to the living world itself. He throws his mind outward into the beasts of the land. Ravens blacken the sky. Direwolves race through the battlefield. Great bears and shadow cats emerge from the wilds. All had lived in fear, and all are eager for revenge. Through the storm of fire and blood, Ned Stark and Daenerys Targaryen push forward. Daenerys riding Drogon, unleashing torrents of dragonfire upon the dead. The flames consume them, turning them to ash while the beasts tear at them. But the Night King does not burn. He raises his arms, and more whites rise from the ground. But before he can strike, Ned is there. Ice meets steel as Ned Stark faces off against death itself. The Night King's strength is monstrous, his blade as cold as the void, but Ned fights on. Ice meets his frozen blade, and each strike sends him stumbling back. Bran watches and reaches out one last time, his mind wrapping around the beasts. As they clash, they can see Ned losing. His sword is thrown back, and he can barely keep his feet. The next blow throws him back several feet, just as Drogon's fire engulfs the Night King. Though it does not hurt him, it blinds him long enough for the beasts to come. Summer pounces at him, bears swipe at him, and ravens claw at his eyes, sending him to the ground, and while he lies there, Ned rises and drives his sword into the Night King's chest. The Night King's head jerks back, and he crumbles into 1,000 pieces. Moments later, the rest of his army joins him, screaming and stumbling about until they are nothing but ice. With the war over, terms are now discussed. Robert is gravely wounded and requires time to recover and propose an idea. Daenerys shall rule for the time being, but with men like Ned as her counsel. This ensures they can keep an eye on her. When the time comes, she may also marry Orys to ensure both family lines continue. That's our theory. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the Seven Kingdoms and beyond, then please like, share, and subscribe to our channel.